Today's date is August 14th, 2003. This is a New Westminster Sports Oral History Project with Ken Winslade. Ken, what is your full name?
Donald Kenneth Winslade.
And could you tell me your date and place of birth?
July 9th, 1938, in Royal Columbian Hospital, New Westminster.
What's your marital status?
I'm married to Jean. Jean Langland was a New Westminster resident, and I've been married 38 years. And I have two boys, Jason 35 and Jeff 30, and Jason has two twin grandchildren, a boy and a girl, and 7 years old.
Wow. Where were your parents from?
My parents actually are from New Westminster, and my father was actually born in Cloverdale, but my mother was born in New Westminster, and they've resided all their lives in New Westminster.
Oh, okay. And how about you? Have you always been a New Westminster resident?
I was born in New Westminster, grew up in New Westminster, through high school in New Westminster, stayed at home while going to university, and when I got married, we moved 6 miles away out to Coquitlam by the Lougheed Mall area there, but I still sort of always consider myself a New Westminster person because I still do all my business and all my friendships are still in New Westminster.
Right. Good. Could you please tell me your current address?
612 Ebert Avenue in Coquitlam.
Great. All right. So, about sports. Tell me a little bit about when you first began playing sports.
Well, when we were growing up, I lived in the 1500 block Dublin Street in the west end of New Westminster, and the west end in the late 30s, early 40s was a new sort of growth area in the city, so lots of young families were growing up there. And I guess naturally we just started to play sports out on the streets, hitting a ball and kicking a ball, and I guess you realize at some point that you kind of enjoy this and do have athletic ability. We played at that school, at our elementary school, Lord Tweedsmuir, various softball, soccers, and those kind of sports through the physical education. And when we got to be 10, 11 years old, we realized there was a minor softball league in the city that played by neighborhoods. And so we started playing with the West End team and played against the Kelvin team and the Spencer team and the Safferton team. And I think that's one of the interesting things about the earlier days in New Westminster. We played by our neighborhoods. We competed against other kids by neighborhood, rather than today where you all go together in one big pot and get put on their general teams. And I kind of think there was a lot of value in that. Those neighborhood friendships are still there today, and we still talk about those fun days of playing the neighborhood team.
Right. Would that have created a sense of competitiveness or rivalry as well, do you think?
Well, we still today kid each other about it.
Yeah.
Who had the best athletes in the neighborhood and who had the best teams, and remember some of the great games we had.
Yeah. And also, I guess it helped to keep the community together too, is that right?
It gave the community a sense of neighborhoods, I think. It's been interesting the last few years to watch sense of neighborhood come back. I think that you see in the city the various neighborhood associations, and it's not by sport, but it's by neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are getting a lot more value on their history and their traditions, and a lot of schools are having their 50, 60-year elementary school get-togethers, and that's when I know when I went to the Tweedsmuir reunion at 50 years, that's when I first really realized how important the neighborhood was in growing up and how we played together in neighborhoods.
Good. So you mentioned that you actually began in a sort of a semi-official league at the age of 10 or so. So would softball then have been the first real team that you played with?
Yeah, softball was very big in the city. They had a huge league running out of Moody Park, and and they had a minor program that went right from 10-year-olds up to playing senior men's. And so it was kind of the sport to play in the summer. It was sort of the sport that all kids played who wanted to compete.
And then did you ever, what sort of sport did you move on to do that after that?
Well, I was playing lacrosse about 11 years old, and also started hockey in Pee Wee, which is 11 and 12 years old. So I was actually playing those three sports from 10 years old probably up to 15 years old.
Right, so right up into the early 1950s then, I guess, right? Okay, you mentioned that you played with friends in the neighborhood. Now, with the lacrosse and the hockey, was there still that same sort of community feel to it?
No, there weren't as many kids competing as there were in softball, so those were done as more community leagues, and we played out of Moody Park, for example, our team, and everybody had to play out of Queen's Park Arena for hockey because it was the only arena in town. So,
I see.
So people tend to forget that in the 1950s there were only three arenas: Queen's Park Arena, Vancouver Forum, and Carrickdale Arena, and that's all there were in the greater Vancouver area. So there weren't a lot of opportunities in those days to play hockey.
Right. No outdoor rinks, I guess.
No, we were just fortunate in Westminster. We had a small town and a big arena, so we got lots of opportunities.
Right, I see. So you mentioned you played these sports up to about the age of 15. What happened after that?
Well, then when I went to Duke of Connaught at grade 10, I realized that this was a pretty high-profile basketball school, and I started playing basketball and realized that I could play that game pretty well. So I couldn't play hockey and basketball because of the competing time. So I basically gave up hockey and concentrated on basketball when I went to grade 10 at 15 years old at Duke of Connaught. Interesting side story to that is that my dad, who had sort of followed me through the hockey days and driving over to the arenas and sitting around, got recruited into being on the executive of the Minor Hockey Association.
Oh, yeah.
He became the president of the New Westminster Minor Hockey Association for 2 years, and then I left, and he stayed on, and eventually in the mid-1960s became the president of the BC Amateur Hockey Association for 2 years. He always said I kind of deserted him and let him do all the dirty work.
Right, I guess so. So would it be safe to say that basketball was your favorite sport then?
Well, certainly, after when I got into my teens, it certainly became my only sport. I mean, I just completely concentrated on it and gave up all the other sports. I had been playing softball up until I was 14, 15, and was playing in the senior men's league at 14 and 15 with the older people. But again, I just got so enthralled with basketball, I just gave all that up.
Why did you like basketball so much?
Who knows? I could play it. It just was a challenge, and I found I could play it well, and I just found myself getting better and better as I played it, and I just really enjoyed it.
How long have you been involved in basketball?
Well, since I was 15, basically.
And so you're still involved?
Still active with the BC High School Boys Basketball Association. I've worked on their executive for many years, mainly focusing on staging the provincial championships, and my main role today is to do most of the negotiating with the Silver National Exhibition on the site and the major sponsors, the Nikes and the McDonald's and the Cokes and those people who are major sponsors of the event. It's a huge event, the biggest amateur sports event in the province. It draws 15 to 20,000 people over the 5 days of the tournament.
No kidding.
It's a big show.
Yeah, that is a big deal. Would you mind giving me sort of a brief chronology of your life in basketball?
Well, I played as a grade 10 at Duke of Connaught on the junior team, and we got to the Vancouver District Final that year, so we had a pretty good team. Played grade 11 at Duke of Connaught, and then in grade 12, the Duke of Connaught and Trap Tech closed, and the new high school was built called Lester Pearson High School, which is now Westminster High School. So they combined Trap Tech and Duke of Connaught into one team, and that was 1956. And we had a very, very strong team that year, and lost only one game to an American team that year, and won the provincial championship as a grade 12 team. Then I went on to play 5 years at UBC, and then when I left UBC, I basically only played 1 year after that for a senior men's team called McGavin's Bakery, and we won the BC championship that year. And then I got all involved in teaching and coaching and work, and got involved with the executive of the BC Boys High School at that time.
Right. So, during your time as an actual player, what position did you play generally?
I was a guard, a little guard.
A little guard. I guess the people are getting larger and larger.
Well, we had a big team. I mean, in grade 12 in high school, we had 2 players who were 6'6", and that's probably having like 2 players who are 7 foot today.
Right.
And me at 6 feet, I was a pretty tall guard. Most of the guards around 5'8" or 5'6". And,
really?
And so I would be probably a 6'5", 6'6" guard today in comparative nature. So, so yeah, it's interesting how people certainly are taller, than they certainly were in our day. Anybody 6'6", 6'7" was really big. And we had 2 of them.
Did any of these guys that you played with in high school, I mean, obviously they're from New Westminster, did any of them sort of stick out that you'd like to mention?
Well, Don Krigo was 6'7", and he was from Queensborough, and he was the most valuable player in 1956 in the BC High School tournament. And he went over to Port Alberni and played for many years for the Alberni Athletics, and set up I think it was a petroleum distribution company over there. And George Grozier was the other 6'6" kid, and he went back to Ontario and worked there. I didn't see much of him after. Dave McDonald was my running mate at guard, and he was very successful in setting up the first cablevision company in New Westminster. And had McDonald Cedar, and then he has subsequently sold that, and now used to live on Fifth Avenue in New Westminster, Fifth Street, pardon me. And he had the great basketball court out the back of his place there. We used to play for years and years, and he's been very active in the community, a real philanthropist, and has been the chairman of the Royal Columbian Hospital Foundation, the St. Mary's Hospital Foundation, a real contributor to the city, and has remained a good, long-time friend. So then Ronnie Bagliati was the 5th member of that starting 5, and he's worked for Royal City Glass for many years, and he's now up in Mission and still working. I talked to him about a month ago, and his big job is all the glass windows at Simon Fraser University.
Oh, really? Lots of glass there. Wow, that's great. Now, would it be safe to say, well, actually, you should tell me, did you go to UBC to play basketball or to do schooling?
Well, I went to do schooling. I mean, basketball was an attraction, but basically, I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that, and that's where you had to go. And playing basketball, I didn't know I could play out there. I didn't know I could, whether I would make the team or whether I would play. So it certainly wasn't basketball motivated. It's just fortunate that they had a basketball program to be competing.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the facilities that you played in when you were playing in New Westminster.
Well, we played most of our games at the junior high gym, which was one of the newest gyms. The junior high had been built in 1950, and it was one of the newest, fanciest gyms in the province. Across the street from Duke of Connaught was the YMCA, which Duke of Connaught was where the City Hall now sits in Westminster.
Oh, okay.
And across the street on Royal Avenue was the YMCA, and that's Duke of Connaught didn't have a gym, so that's where we did all our practices and all our PE classes and that over at Duke of Connaught. So we would have to play up at the junior high for all our games, and then we travel around Vancouver and Surrey in the various gyms out there.
What was the best gym?
Well, the best gym in the province was UBC.
Oh, okay.
UBC was built again in 1950 and was ultra-modern. I still today, when I go back there, I still think that looks like a very ultra-modern gymnasium. They have upgraded it to some degree, but it was a class gym. It was unique because it had horsehair under the floor, and it was a very springy floor. It's quite interesting to follow the history of that. Fred Hume, the historian at UBC, has talked to me a few times about that, and that you had to learn that the floor sort of gave, but it was the mecca to play, was to get to UBC to play at UBC. But probably from a gymnasium point of view, probably New Westminster's junior high was the best gym in the area, from the point of view of being new and modern.
Right. You've mentioned that after you played basketball quite a bit, you went on to coach and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences as a coach? Or
well, I actually I got started in coaching in kind of roundabout way when I was at the UBC. It's actually how I got into working for the city. I needed when I was in my third year, I needed a program called field work, and you had to go out and do a program of some kind of teaching in the community to get credit for a university course.
Right.
So at the time, 1958, they just started the recreation department in New Westminster, and a gentleman named Al Thiessen was hired as the recreation superintendent. So I went knocking on his door and said, I need to, I was living in New Westminster, and I said, I need a class or something to teach to make this requirement. So he said, what are you interested in? I told him, well, basketball. And he said, okay, I'll see what I can do. So he phoned back a week later, and he said he's got the high school gym, the junior high gym, which is the gym we just talked about, the nicest gym maybe in the province from a high school point of view. And he said, I can get Tuesday nights from 7:30 to 9:30. And he said, we'll run it as a recreation program. So anyway, long and the short of it, we started that. It became a super successful program. Almost 200 kids were showing up on a Tuesday evening, and we had to bring in extra people to help. And anyway, it was became sort of the high-profile winter program of the recreation department. And so that's how I sort of, got into the teaching, into the coaching bit of it.
Right.
And then from there, when I left teaching, got my degree, I went to a junior high in Burnaby and coached the grade 9 team there. Then I went back to university and did my master's degree, and I coached the freshman team at university. The coach asked me if I would coach the freshman team, so that was a real unique experience for me. And then the following 2 years, I went to Burnaby Central and coached Burnaby Central for 2 years, 1963 and 64, basically. And we were pretty successful. We got to the BC tournament the first year. The team had been 4 wins and 22 losses the year before I got there, and then the next year we got to the BC tournament. And the following year, my second year there, we got to the semifinals. We got to the Final Four of the BC tournament. So we had pretty quick success and put Burnaby Central on the map as far as the basketball program was concerned. And that's all I taught. That's when I got the opportunity to come to New Westminster, and sat there ever since.
And would it be safe to say that basketball helped you to get into New Westminster? In the sense of getting to know people?
Well, it certainly gave me the opportunity to, be known. I became well known with my basketball success.
Right.
And also I became pretty successful in the programs and that I was doing with the city.
Right.
For example, when, after I had done the basketball program, Al Thiessen, the recreation superintendent, asked if I'd want to stay on and help him in the summer running the playgrounds and swimming pools. And so I did that, and then he said, well, how about staying on next winter and doing the basketball again, but also running the ski classes for me and doing some gymnastics programs. So I started literally from that point on in 1959 working year-round on a full-time, part-time basis.
Right.
You know, with the city. So yeah, I got to know people in the city, and I guess they saw the success I was having with the various programs and what I could do. So when August 1965 came around, and the city manager of the day phoned me and said that there's some changes taking place in Parks and Recreation, and we want to talk to you about coming and taking over that for us. So,
Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
In 1965.
August 1965.
What an honor.
Yeah, I was 25 years old, and I was quite honored to be asked.
Yeah, yeah. And so how long did you stay in that position for?
Well, I stayed in that position from 1965, and then I moved into the city administrator position 7 years ago. So whatever year that was, I kind of lost track, but I think I was certainly in the 35, 37 years with Parks and Recreation.
Right, right.
Full-time and part-time, and then I spent 6 years as a city manager for the city.
Right. Were you ever a referee for games?
No.
No, never did anything.
Probably
like
a bad referee.
Now you've mentioned that you played in the YMCA gym for the Duke of Connaught, and then the junior high gym, right? Are these facilities all still around?
Well, the Y certainly isn't. The Y was done away with many, many years ago, and they built a new Y, which subsequently on Queens Avenue and 6th Street, which subsequently is gone.
Oh, okay.
But the junior high gym is certainly still there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they built a new gym at the high school when they built Leslie Pearson in 1956. So there were two big gyms in that school.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just getting back to when you used to play basketball, you know, during high school and in university, were people in the high schools and in the neighborhoods interested in the games?
Oh, yes. We used to get huge crowds. I mean, it was sort of the thing to do in New Westminster. You have to appreciate how high-profile basketball was in New Westminster. If you go back into the 20s and 30s and 40s, you'll find a lot of pictures of the Adenacks and the various Russell Hotel teams who won BC championships and won Canadian championships. So basketball was quite big in New Westminster. And then in 1946, Ken Wright, who was a teacher at the Duke of Connaught, actually started the provincial championship at the YMCA.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was an 8-team tournament, and he held it the first couple years of the YMCA, and then moved it up to the Arenex in New Westminster.
Oh, yeah.
Which is still there today.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1950, moved it to the junior high gym in New Westminster. So for the first 5-6 years, the BC High School Championship was held in New Westminster, and then it moved to UBC in 1951 when that was built. And so there was a huge interest in basketball, a huge following of basketball. In the first 11 years, from 1946 to 1956, New Westminster won the high school boys championship 6 times. So they won 6 out of 11 years.
Really?
And so and then there was this huge rivalry between Duke of Connaught and Trapp Tech, the two New Westminster schools. They used to play every year for the Sangster Cup, which Mayor Louis Sangster donated. And it was a 2-out-of-3 series, and it was the highlight of the high school basketball year. Was this Sangster Cup? You used to get huge coverage in the Vancouver papers.
Oh,
and
really?
the high school up there's probably seats around 1,000, and they used to jam about 1,200, 1,500 people in to see these high school games. And it would be quite common for you to get 600 to 800 people to a high school game every night. And what they used to do, it sort of became a bit of a social event, because you would have the game, and then you'd come back to school and have what they call the sock hop down in the basement of the old Duke of Connaught gym, and you would just get together after the game with this informal sock hop sort of thing. So it was quite the thing to do, and was really well covered by the newspapers, because we didn't have the Lions, didn't have the Canucks. It was all amateur sport in those days. So basketball in Westminster was right up there with the top sports stories of the day.
Really? I've talked to a couple of journalists, and they said basketball was one of the most exciting sports to cover at the time, too. And would that have had a lot to do with the people that came and watched?
Well, I think there was certainly the atmosphere, but I think in Westminster a lot had to do with that Trap Tech Connaught rivalry,
right?
Which was quite intense. And you had the two great coaches, Rudy Wiley at Tech and Ken Wright at Connaught. And the stories are wild and wonderful of the gimmicks they would play and the things they would do to outfox the other person in the game. But it was just a very high interest, and majority of the community followed it.
Really?
Followed what was going on in the high school basketball because it was the big story of the winter.
Mm. Oh, all right. Of course, it's a winter sport too. Mm. So, what's the difference between what it was like then and now in terms of basketball?
Well, the first thing, you only have the one high school, so that rivalry went away. Secondly, there's much more competition or opportunities for competition in other sports. Mm-hmm. And so everybody isn't playing basketball. There's kids playing hockey, volleyball is becoming very big, soccer. And plus sports have become kind of year-round. To be good in a sport, you've got to play it year-round. You've got to play in spring leagues and summer leagues. And so you don't see these, you go back into the 50s, and there were many great athletes who played in 3 and 4 sports. Ken Swalwell and Jack Luco and Billy Job, and they played all the sports and were very good in all the sports. And you couldn't do that today because you have to specialize. You have to go to these high-profile summer camps. And you've got like Basketball BC, the provincial organization looks after basketball outside of high school, and the province has all these summer teams and summer programs. And so it just kind of lost its edge, and that rivalry kind of went away. It was still good. I mean, Ernie Nyhog took over up at the high school and coached for 10 years or so, and he had very competitive teams up through the 60s. And then, I don't know, kids just kind of filtered off into other sports.
Right.
It just hasn't been the same in Westminster, certainly like it was in the 50s and early 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
You mentioned that for the BC Championships, there's 8 teams to begin with. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to when I went to up to the New Westminster, it went to 16, and actually I think it might have gone to 16 in 1948. I think only the first 2 or 3 years it was 8 teams, then it went to 16, and then 10 years ago it went to 20. It's now 20 teams.
Wow, so it's a pretty big league.
It's a big event. There's 256 schools in the province playing, and the whole objective is to get to that BC championship.
Right.
And play in the Peony Agriome, and just like our goal was to play at UBC.
Right.
That's the place you wanted to get to.
Right. As a player at UBC, what would have been the ultimate goal there?
Well, my goal, I remember, was to make the team when I first went out there. See, you have to understand that I was very late getting started in basketball. I didn't start playing until I was in high school, and I just kind of got better and better, as the years went on. And when I went to UBC, I wasn't comfortable or confident, I could even make that team up there. So my first real objective was just make a team, because they had 3 teams in those days. They had the freshman team, they had their junior varsity team, then they had their senior team. And the freshmen didn't play on the senior team, so my goal was to make that junior varsity team, which I did. And then, of course, my goal next year was to make the senior team and play from there. So I just wanted to play. I just loved playing and wanted to play, and that was my goal.
So how would you get from like university basketball to, say, Canadian nationals? Is there?
Well, there weren't Canadian nationals in those days. In 1960, when I was in my last year at UBC, the way it worked is that the winner of the Canadian Amateur Championship went to represent Canada in the Olympics.
Oh, okay.
And so the Alberni Athletics had won the BC championship that year. They had to go to Alberta to play Lethbridge, and then if they won that, they had to go back to Montreal to play in the Canadian championship. And they were allowed to pick up 2 players. So they contacted me and asked if I would join them for the 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it took. And this was in March, and I'm in my last year at university, but couldn't turn down the opportunity. So anyway, long and the short of it, I joined them, played with them for 3 weeks, went back to Alberta, beat the Lethbridge Broaders 2 out of 3 in a really battle royal 5-game series. Then we went back to Montreal and played in a 4-team round-robin tournament. And long and the short of it is we lost to the Ontario team on the final game by 5 points. So I always said I was 5 points from Rome.
Oh, right, it's the Rome Olympics.
Yeah, the Rome Olympics in 1960.
Oh, wow.
So that's how, and that was it. There was no Canadian men's team, per se. That didn't start up until sort of a couple of years later. In fact, I had an opportunity to join a team that was based out of Lethbridge that was going to go to the Philippines and play in the World Championships in 1962, but I decided to go back and do my master's degree that year instead. And that was sort of the start of the Canadian team per se, right. But Canada never really seriously put together a team like they do today. They found out,
right.
If you want to compete, you've got to actually put a team together.
Right, like the States have, for instance.
Well, they even struggle with it. They're not quite sure who should play the college kids or the pros, and they sort of have all kinds of different teams going today.
Right. See. Tell me a little bit about what you most enjoy about sports.
Well, it's probably the competitive nature of it, just kind of the self-satisfaction of being able to accomplish something. And even today, I still got a hoop out in my backyard, and I'll still go out there. And as I said, you never lose your shooting touch, and it's just something competitive about it, and it's rewarding when you have success with it. And I just find I didn't realize at the time because it was very competitive, but today it's just a nice break. It's fun to compete. It's, you get to know lots of people. My basketball contacts are enormous, in this province, and it's just some wonderful friendships you develop and just some wonderful memories.
Tell me a little bit about some memorable events from high school and or UBC that really stick out in your mind.
Well, in high school, without question, the biggest event is winning the high school boys basketball championship. I still say today that was my biggest thrill in sport, all the successes I've had. Probably because it was the ultimate goal of every kid in high school to play in that championship and to win it, and to be selected a provincial all-star. Was a great moment for me. But certainly winning that championship in high school was by far today, I still say, the biggest thrill I ever had in sports. At UBC, memorable games. I remember the first year I was playing the varsity team at UBC. We were playing a team called the Seattle Buchanans, and they had some ex-university basketball players on their team, and I remember playing that game and being pretty successful in it. I remember
when you say successful,
I scored a lot of points. Maybe scored 15 points or something. As a freshman, as a first-year player, and people all of a sudden were saying, "Gosh, this kid can really play," sort of thing. And,
right.
I remember my first year ever at UBC, my first game at UBC, when I was in junior varsity. We were playing a senior men's team in Vancouver, and again, I was a bit of an unknown. I had played on the high school championship team, but players who were considered better than I was. And that first game, I remember I scored 34 points. So 34 points were a lot of points in those days. Just the way the game was played in that, and everybody was kind of jolted by that sort of thing. And that's when I think people kind of sat back and said, "Gee, this guy can really play the game." So and then Oh, we had some great games at UBC. You know, we were battling Manitoba for my last 2 years. We were battling Manitoba for the Western Canada Championship, and in my third year, the only game we lost was to Manitoba back in Manitoba, and we won all the other games and won the championship that year. And then the last year, we were playing again in Manitoba, and they televised those games. CBC used to televise a game, college game. And that sort of shows how basketball used to have that high profile, and that, again, was the 50s. Anyway, we managed to beat Manitoba back there, and then we played them in the last game of the year out at UBC. And my real objective was want to finish that season undefeated and beat this Manitoba team. So again, we played that game, and I think I scored 28 points that game, and that was my last game at UBC, and ended up, very, very successful note. Yeah, there were a lot of great games.
Yeah, I bet. What about you've mentioned a couple, like the BC championships in high school, winning those and things. Any other real significant wins for you that you would like to talk about?
Well, I remember when I was 12 years old, we were over in Duncan playing in the BC boys softball championships, and we were playing this team from Victoria, and we managed to beat them to win the BC championship as a 12-year-old. That was sort of my first real success. I still have my little pennant at home that they gave us for winning that.
And what position did you play?
Well, I was a first baseman and a pitcher.
Oh, okay.
Chucker, as they call him.
Chucker, yeah.
And then, wow, we had so many wonderful games. In high school, it's hard to relate to them all. I guess the Sangster Cup game against Trap Tech that we won was always a highlight, something I always remember, because again, that was so high profile. And I think those wins against Manitoba for the Western Canada Championship were probably two really big ones I remember.
How about achievements that you've had in the sport of basketball? Can you relate some of those to me?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, in 1956, I was selected to the first All-Star team of the BC High School Championships.
Right.
The year we won the championship. The next year, my first year at UBC, I was selected as the top first-year player. I think they called it the Rookie of the Year. That was playing in the men's league, so I was this young 18-year-old playing in the men's league, and got a trophy for that. And then out at UBC, the last 2 years at UBC, I was selected for the first All-Star team for the Western Canada Championship, and also the most valuable player in the league for those 2 years.
Oh, yeah. In the league?
In the league, yeah.
Wow.
So that was, those are quite significant honors.
Yeah, I bet. And since then, I know that you've been mentioned as Athlete of the Year in New Westminster. What did that entail?
Well, the Columbian newspaper used to select the Athlete of the Year, and I was fortunately selected in 1960. That was the year, my last year at university, when we had the great success of winning the championships, and I had my personal successes. And it was selected by the editorial board of the Columbian newspaper, and again, in those days, was quite a high, prestigious award, and some very significant athletes in New Westminster had won that, and I was just pleased to join that list.
Right.
Subsequently, UBC started up a Sports Hall of Fame, and a few years back, I was elected as a member of the BC Sports Hall of Fame for my basketball career at UBC, which was quite an honor.
Right.
I consider all those great athletes out there.
Yeah, I guess so. And some of these other athletes, these great athletes, so you say, do you still maintain contact with some of these people?
Well, I see them all over the place. I was at Bob Osborne passed away a few months ago. Bob had been very great athlete, track and field and basketball in his day, and had gone on to be the head of the physical education department at University of British Columbia for a lot of years. And I went to his funeral, and yeah, there were some pretty significant people there. Pat McGeer, the ex-MLA and great doctor, research doctor of the day, and Hart Phillips, ex-mayor of Vancouver, and Gardy Gardam, the ex-lieutenant governor. And
Oh, yeah.
I know all those people through basketball. I can go talk to those people. And,
Right.
And the UBC basketball, alumni is quite a significant group.
Good. Can you relate to me any sort of stories about people or games or events that really stick out in your mind? Quirky, funny, about locals?
Well, my funniest memory, and only because I was speaking of the Osbornes, do I remember this story, because I shared it with Wayne Osborne, who was a son of Bob Osborne, who played with me at UBC. And Wayne's he passed away, unfortunately, back in Ontario. He was big with the Royal Dalton people back in Ontario, the ceramic people. But I was sharing this with his son and daughter at the funeral, because I'd never met them, and they wanted to know, how their dad was as a player. But we were playing in Port Alberni, and you have to understand the Alberni gym. But anyway, the story goes that we were coming down on a fast break, 3-on-2, and Dave McDonald, it wouldn't be Dave McDonald, he wasn't playing at that time, I don't remember. It was Eddie Wild who was in the middle. I was on one side, and Wayne was on the other side, and just coming down. Anyway, the long and the short of it is the pass came to me, and I went in and did the layup. Well, normally Wayne would just stop and turn and go back, but he was frustrated because he didn't get the pass. He went right out the folding bifold doors, went around the concession area, came back in the other doors. Meanwhile, we're playing defense, wondering where Wayne has gone, and he's done this circle of the concession area and come back through the other doors. And told the coach he couldn't stop in time to turn and come back up. That was a very, very funny story.
Yeah. So you guys must have had a lot of fun then.
Well, we have lots of fun. Yeah, we have lots of stories of getting to games. I remember we were Winton Derby, who was my next door neighbor in the West End, who was my just inseparable friend through high school, and he went on to Vancouver, became a very high-profile lawyer in Vancouver. And he was the manager of our team. He couldn't play basketball, but he wanted to be involved, so he was the manager. And his famous story today is when we were going to play McGee in Vancouver, grade 12, 1956, and he forgot to take the basketballs to the game. And so we ended up with no basketballs to play this game with, and Rudy Wiley was the coach at the time. Went up and down him, so every time we see him, we ask him if he's got his basketballs today. But you have to appreciate what a high-profile lawyer he's become in Vancouver to get the sensitivity of that story.
Right. Tell me about some of these friendships that you formed as a player or being involved in sports.
Well, my wife describes it best by saying that the tentacles of high school basketball go everywhere. And university basketball. I don't think I go very many places that I don't run into somebody who either played with me, played against me, saw me play, or heard about me playing. Again, it was high profile in those days because you weren't competing with the Canucks and the BC Lions who were relatively new, and so it used to get high coverage. Many high profile reporters of the future covered high school basketball. Al Fotheringham.
Oh, really?
I've got clippings at home of him when I was playing first year university. He was covering our games, and Lauren Parton and Jack Lee and Lowell Ulrich today, and they just go on and on. Some of them started with the Columbian newspaper here and moved on, but there was there was a lot of emphasis given to that kind of coverage sort of thing. So they covered it well, and as a result, people followed it. And between growing up in Westminster, it was a small town, and everybody really followed what was going on with the individuals in Westminster. And the coverage it got, whenever I'm out places and get introduced socially, or people see me, it's often they say, "Oh yes, I remember you, playing there."
Okay.
Friendships, gosh, I have, I just have basketball friends all over the place, some are close and some I just know at a distance. But, at my retirement function a few months ago, there were 7 or 8, people I played with. There were 3 or 4 from the high school team I played with. 2 coaches were there from the high school team.
Really?
A lot of the university players were there, and so many of my close friends today are through the high school basketball, and many are people I can pick up the phone at any time and talk to, sort of thing. So it's been a huge impact on my life. There's no question about it.
Right.
And influenced what I do today. I mean, I'm a fanatic basketball fan, and I get kidded because I'm known to travel to North Carolina and Illinois to watch college basketball games.
Oh, really?
Today. And I just really enjoy the sport. I just enjoy the college level. I'm not a great pro fan, but really enjoy the college high school game. And we'll go out of my way to go and watch games.
Why do you prefer the college high school?
Well, part of my coaching nature. The pro game is almost too predictable. It's just all one-on-one street ball, as I call it. College game is still coached and still very strategic, and leads can just evaporate quickly with the strategies change, and it's just a much more entertaining game. Plus, I just enjoy the college crowd. The college crowds are really exciting to watch.
I've heard people say that about sports like football as well.
Yeah.
And baseball. Well, you've mentioned a little bit that sports has had a big impact on your life. In terms of things like life skills and discipline and meaning and things like that, has that been a part as well as sports?
Well, I was asked to do that for an article at UBC one day, and my comments were that playing together as a team really taught us to aim for high achievement and to work together to a shared vision of success, and we had to work with enthusiasm, and we had to work with the commitment to constantly improve. And in the end, what I came to learn is that through hard work and commitment, you can be very successul. I think that really helped me in my future life, in the way I managed, in the way I ran my departments. I really learned the value of time. That having to drive back and forth to UBC every day and practice 2 hours every day, plus do all the coursework, was quite something. So I learned that loyalty to a group is really important. That people have to learn to count on one another. I remember when I moved to City Hall, my first staff meeting, I said to people, I've just got to be able to count on you. When I ask you to do something, I've just got to know you're going to do it.
Right.
I can't be worrying about you not going to do it. And I learned that, I think, through playing sports per se. Another thing I think I realized is that everybody's contribution really counted on a team. And a team is really like a workforce where everybody, despite what they do, is important. And one thing I tried to instill in people who work for us was no matter where you are in the organization, whatever you do really counts. And often it's the people lowest down in the organization who are really the important ones. I mean, it's the people who answer the phones, the people who deal with the public, who are the really important ones. They're as important as those managers up at the top, sort of thing. And also I think that I learned that my success is only as successful as other people. If the guy doesn't get the rebound, I don't get the ball, so I can't score. Right. So if the person down below doesn't do the job properly, doesn't do good work, then it's not going to give you the resources and the material you need to do good work. And I really learned the whole concept of teamwork and sharing and counting on each other. And at the end of the day, you just develop super positive values and relationships with people through sport. There's just no question it had a huge impact on my philosophy of how people get together, how things are done, what has to happen to make things successful, and the way you have to treat different individuals. I think the other thing is when you play on a team, everybody's kind of different. And when you coach, it's really even more important that you have to realize the sensitivity of some people. You can criticize some people, they take it. Others, you can't. They'll go into a different kind of mood. So there's just no question that the impact of playing that team sport, the discipline it taught me to value my time, to get things done properly, and all the relationships that go into making a team work are the same things that go into making the workforce work. And that certainly served me well.
Yeah, I bet. You've mentioned before that often, especially in a high school basketball, that it was a real community thing. I mean, there was community rivalries between the two high schools, and a lot of people got involved. Do you think that sort of sense of community is still important to a town like New Westminster?
Well, I think anything that gives a community pride is important, and I think that I think today there's just so many competing issues for information today that it's much tougher to get that profile today. There are so many more things to do, movies and theaters and DVDs and what have you. I mean, in those days, in our day, television was relatively new. I mean, relatively new. I remember my big thrill when my backdoor neighbor in 1949 got a TV, and I got to see the first World Series game I'd ever seen, after listening to it on radio all these years. And so through the 50s, people were just starting to get TVs and that sort of thing. So your whole your life was much more built around your high school and the activities of the high school. Today, I don't think kids have the loyalty to the schools that we had, and unless there's some really good leadership in the school, I think kids just go to school and then they're gone and they're off doing their own things. And there's so many more community things to do today, dancing and arts and all the competing things. I look at my grandkids and, they're busy every night of the week. Well, we're out in the street every night of the week playing. They're all in organized, gymnastics, lacrosse, soccer, dancing, music, and so life is so much more organized for them. Whereas ours was so much more community focused. We just all finish dinner, we go out in the street, and what game we're going to play or where we're going to go next. And I used to religiously get on my bike and pedal over, when I wasn't playing softball to Moody Park to watch softball 7 days a week.
Really?
We'd be over there. That was the fun thing to do.
Right.
Well, today, social times have changed, and most parents wouldn't allow their kids to pedal a bike alone, from Dublin Street over to Moody Park and back. Which is kind of a sad commentary of our time because they were wonderful days growing up.
Yeah. Well, good. I think that's about everything in the interview. Is there anything that you feel I've missed or that you'd like to add to the interview?
No, I'm just as I've got older, I've realized how fortunate I was to grow up in New Westminster. Grow up in such a community town. New Westminster was at that time considered the city of champions. I'm sure in your research you're going to find lacrosse and hockey and soccer championships through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I mentioned basketball ones. I know they had some early successes there. So it was a very sports-minded city, and the community was very supportive of sport. And I'm very, very fortunate that I grew up in this town and had those opportunities of facilities and coaches and the value that sport was placed on in the city, sort of thing. And that we had great great neighborhoods, and we had a lifestyle that kind of made it easy. And I look at my children and their children today, and I don't think that's there today. So I'm grateful for that, and I always respect New Westminster for being that great town it was, and as far as its attitude towards sport, that's why you're doing this study, because it has such a great great background in sports, and it's such a part of the cultural history and the values of the community.
Good. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. It was good.